Welcome to the Hills Property Panel. Dr. Andrew Wilson, Chief Economist, My Housing Market, and Stu Benson, number one auctioneer for the Hills District.
Benson Auctions.
Benson Auctions.
We've got the plugs.
And really the reason to come back again, Dr. Andrew Wilson, is the big picture. There's been some major events happening over the past month. Let's get straight to those major events and what's happening in the marketplace.
Well, I think the word tumultuous comes to mind clearly, particularly when talking of May. Of course, we had the first interest rate increase in nearly 11 years, and we have a change of government. So there's been a lot of distractions over the month, really over the year. Sydney's housing market, of course, is cool given that spectacular growth of the last 2 years, eminently predictable because affordability is obviously challenging buyers. But the interesting thing is, once we've got had the election behind us, I guess a lot of negative headlines regarding the outlook for interest rates and what that means for the markets. Really, by the end of the month, buyers were just taking it, and sellers were taking it in their stride. Sydney reported a just under 66% clearance rate for the month. So that reflects 2/3 of properties offered are actually selling, and that's a good result still, I think, for sellers, given the circumstances of the market. Prices have stabilised over the past month, so we're not seeing any significant falls in prices despite those distractions. So stable prices in Sydney, still at those record levels. And bad news continues for tenants with rents skyrocketing. We've got rents up over 20% in Sydney over the past year for houses, and unit rents are up about 15% over the past year. So investors will be, I guess, licking their chops, but unfortunately tenants, the news isn't so good and we've really run out of property. But we're now entering the quieter mid-winter market, but numbers are still quite high coming through, and I think we'll still have a reasonable June in prospect before it really gets chilly.
But when we talk about the supply and demand rental market, there's not much available. In Castle Hill, as an example, 76 properties. Across the land mass of Castle Hill, there's 13,000 dwellings, so we've got 76 properties for lease. Houses, apartments, whatever it might be, granny flats, there's only 76. And then coming into the properties that are for sale, for instance, we've got 97 properties that are on the market across all sorts. Townhouses, apartments, villas, all those things, Stu, that you're representing on the week-to-week basis as well.
Yep.
So we're looking at the big picture. You're saying it's cooling off a little bit in the big picture. But then when we come back to the Hills market, we're seeing that reflection of the cooling. And what's the sentiment? What are the people thinking about the buyers and the vendors back at the Hills District?
Look, to talk granularly and to hone in on the Hills District, to echo what Andrew was saying across the broader market, it's exactly the same. We are seeing around about 6 to 7 in 10 auction properties sell on any given week through any standard 28-day campaign.
A good amount registered, Stu?
Look, the registration numbers are hovering at around about 4 per auction at the moment, which is a slight upswing. We were coming out of a period where we were lucky if we were getting 2 and 3. But I think that's because buyers are actually seeing the stabilisation of the prices, and that's encouraging them that property is moving and property is probably at a level that I'm going to turn up to the auction and it might not actually go $350,000 above reserve. I might be in for a chance. So we are seeing that renewed confidence, and I'm not going to say it's red hot confidence, but there is a renewed confidence that if I turn up, I might actually be a chance. To go back to the absolute red hot market that we've come out of, a lot of people went to auctions expecting to not win. And you're a 1 in 10 chance or a 1 in 20 chance of actually getting the hammer to fall in your favour. And now odds are that you're probably a 1 in 4 chance, and you're dealing with a vendor who's probably got a pretty realistic reserve as well.
It's adjusted in that regard as well, in the pricing and the realisation. So not so much the fear of missing out, and not so much, what should I say about the vendors' expectations being above market? Yeah. So it's kind of all faring into an equilibrium.
Vendors could set high reserves because the heat of the market was probably going to make up that that potential shortfall just purely on the economics of numbers and competition. And now vendors are reading the newspaper, watching social media. They're aware of this correction. And we're getting some very realistic reserves set. I was quoted in the paper on the weekend as saying, hand on heart, I haven't seen reserves this realistic in probably the last 3.5 years. If you're a buyer and you're able to bid at an auction, get yourself registered.
I see. Well, get yourself ready to be in the market.
Correct.
Yes. And what's on my mind, Dr. Andrew Wilson, is change of government.
Yes.
What has it changed?
Well, nothing really. And I think it was interesting as we finished the month of May, of course, after the election result, there was some sort of lower numbers on election day. Of course, distractions agents pitched it on the weekend after the election. And we had some big numbers, over 1,000 auctions in Sydney. And again, we actually had a higher clearance rate than we had on election day. Again, around about that 2/3 of offerings were cleared. So I think that really buyers and sellers just took it in their stride, a little bit of ho-hum, dare I say, and we move on. And I don't think there's anything really specifically from the new government that will, in the shorter term anyway, impact housing markets. You know, we are coming up to the quieter mid-year period in the market.
What do you mean by the quieter months and the quieter period? In what way?
Well, typically once we start moving through June into July and August, buyers are distracted by holidays, school holidays, and a lot of the focus for buyers and sellers generally is about getting that property bought or sold by the end of the year.
Right.
So that's why we have the spring selling season, because people think, okay, we've sort of talked about it during the middle of the year, let's action it. It's September and we're off and running, and that's really the basis of the spring selling season. It's not really got anything to do with the weather. But so we're moving into that decision-making quieter period in the middle of the year. But that really only lasts for about a month or two, and then the market starts picking up in around the middle of August, and of course then it gathers momentum going forward. So I think even though we have that quieter scenario where typically we have downward pressure on prices because there's fewer discretionary buyers and sellers in the market, it will ramp up again as it usually does in September. And housing markets are well positioned for extra demand drivers. We've got borders opening again, mass migration is starting, students will be looking for somewhere to rent, international students, and we've got a raft of policies directed at local buyers, such as the increase in the first home buyer deposit scheme. I mean, there's 50,000 places there nationally. They've got to find somewhere to live, and as you were discussing before, the big problem, and we all discussed, the big problem in Sydney always is too many people and not enough houses, and that always means higher prices and rents.
It's good that we've had a lot of inquiries from investors and first home buyers. It's nice to help them get started and get into the marketplace and just give them factual information. They're always speculating to some regard, and I'm not saying that as a negative to the first home buyers. It's just in a way of, well, maybe if we just wait until this. But if you can call me when the market's swinging up or down, I'd really appreciate that call.
The crystal ball.
The crystal ball. Yeah. But it is good to see the inquiries of the first home buyers. They've had some renewed confidence, whatever it might be, the governments or the schemes and whatnot, whatever it means for them. And also the investors looking at the rental vacancy rates. So there's a good amount of media going out there to say everything's calming down, but there's still a good amount of information out to say maybe it's a good time to think about not paying your high rents and getting caught up in that whole world as well.
When we're speaking about elections, if we go back to the last election 3 years ago, we had actually a similar market in terms of sentiment. There was a lot of scary stuff going around, a lot of really crazy predictions. And in fact, auction clearance rates were a little bit lower than where they are now. Now, if we track forward 3 years and we look at how Sydney house prices have changed, they've actually increased by 55%. So if you were listening to the market then and decided, I'm going to wait, you would have really missed out. And I'm not saying that's going to repeat itself, and it won't, because we had cuts to interest rates and COVID interrupting things, which activated higher prices. But I think the story is, given the history, particularly of the Sydney housing market, I think if you wait, you lose.
Understood, Well, the Hills Property Panel, thanks for joining us again. Dr. Andrew Wilson.
Thank you,
and Stu Benson.
Thank you.
See you for the next episode.
See you the next one.